I'm going to talk about national identity. National identity, a sense of a nation as a cohesive whole, as represented by distinctive tradition, culture, and language. Pancasila is the Indonesian national identity. There are few components of Indonesian national identity. The national language, Indonesian, the state flag, the red and white, and the national anthem, Indonesia Raya, the national emblem, Pancasila, the national motto, Bhinneka Tunggal Ika, the state of constitution, the UUD 1945, the state's form, the Unitarian State of the Republic of Indonesia, embodying the people's sovereignty. The conception of the Nusantara worldview, the regional culture accepted as the national culture heritage. What makes Indonesian national identity is unique and different from others is that every component has its own meaning. And Pancasila never out of date and can be used from time to time. It's a perfect foundation to be ideology and a law for a country. What can we do to preserve our national identity? By increasing our nationalism in ourselves and using Indonesian language in the right way. And last but not least is study hard as our responsibility to be a student, so we can be useful to build our country, Indonesia, for the better future.
I would like to talk about Pancasila and its ideology. To begin with, I would like to emphasize the root of Pancasila and what it actually is, because it is the basis and foundation of Indonesia. In its preamble, the 1945 Constitution sets forth the Pancasila as the embodiment of basic principles of an independent Indonesian state. These 5 principles were announced by Sukarno in speech known as the birth of the Pancasila, which he gave to the Independence Preparatory Committee on June 1st, 1945. In brief, and in the order given in the Constitution, the Pancasila principles are the belief in one's supreme God, humanitarianism, nationalism expressed in the unity of Indonesia, consultative democracy, and social justice. Sukarno's statement of the Pancasila, while simple in form, resulted from a complex and sophisticated appreciation of the ideological needs of a new nation. In contrast to Muslim nationalists who insisted on an Islamic identity for a new state, the framers of the Pancasila insisted on a culturally neutral identity, compatible with democratic or Marxist ideologies. The Pancasila was intended to define the basic values for an Indonesian political culture. Being a foreign student studying abroad, I have come to a realization that in order to fully understand the history and the foundation of Indonesia, I have to understand the importance of the Pancasila. I would like to advise those who are interested in studying in Indonesia to study the past to understand the present. This will help you to adapt to the Indonesian culture. Thank you.
By definition, democracy is the belief in freedom and equality between people or a system government based on his belief, in which power is either held by elected representatives or directly by the people themselves. There are currently 123 democracies in the world of all 192 countries, and Indonesia is one of them. Indonesia has experienced remarkable transformation to a more participatory and more open government over the past 2 decades. While this young democracy continues to make progress, state institutions still struggle to control endemic corruption, improve management of public services, and protect civil rights. After decades of authoritarian rule, Indonesian politics were to reform in order to give the Indonesian people more power in the process of political and economic decision-making. This new period is known as a period of reformation and is remarked by the structural changes such as the decentralization of power to the regions and limits. Since Indonesia began its democratic transition in 1998, wealth inequality has increased significantly. The deepening social gap is associated, above all, with a democratic rise in wealth of the very rich, as well as the stagnating income growth among poorer citizens. Nevertheless, among Southeast Asian countries, Indonesia is one of the few countries that show genuine democratic progress. However, that does not mean that the duty of the citizens is over once a leader is chosen. As citizens, the people are obliged and have the right to monitor as well as criticize the government, especially if the latter is thought to not performing well. Noting all these aspects, although as of today, the execution of democracy in Indonesia is still far from perfect, Indonesians are indeed attempting to create a better country. Taking into account the significant numbers of changes in the society, which by itself is also getting smarter, Indonesian leaders must be careful when taking decisions, especially if they can affect the prosperity and development of the country. Thank you.
Human rights are rights inherent to all human beings, whatever our nationality, place of residence, sex, national, ethnic origin, color, religion, language, or any other status. We are all equally entitled to our human rights without discrimination. These rights are all interrelated, interdependent, and indivisible. Universal human rights are often expressed and guaranteed by law in the forms of treaties, customary international law, general principles, and other sources of international law. International human rights law lays down obligation of governments to act in certain ways or to refrain from certain acts in order to promote and protect human rights and fundamental freedoms of individuals or groups. Actions by government of Indonesia have been noted as a concern by advocates for human rights. Both Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International have criticized the government on multiple subjects. However, the country had national human rights institution, the National Commission of Human Rights, or we call Komnas HAM, since 1993, which enjoys a degree of independence from government and holds UN accreditation. If you want to know how to advance human rights in your everyday life, you can inform yourself and others about why human rights are important by read and disseminate knowledge about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights so that you can understand the understanding of the rights of citizens. Speaking when there are rights at risk or being attacked. If you see someone being bullied, just get them. Respect the human rights of others. And the last is speaking of tolerance and against prejudice. Thank you.
Corruption is the misuse of public power for private gain. This happens in a lot of aspects in our life, such as heritage, education, marriage, election, etc. Major corruption comes close whenever major events involve large sums of money, multiple players, and quantities of products are at stake. Since a long time ago, Indonesia has been one of the world's most corrupt countries. Why? Indonesia people who work for government are greedy and hungry for riches. Also, financial statement in political workplace is easily accessible to everyone. This ends up in everyone able to change the financial statement in incorrect ways. This habit keeps passing to everyone, even to young generations, and planted in everyone's mind. This ends up with corruption as a culture in this country. We ourselves need to understand the essence of learning about corruption and its prevention. We are the young generations. This is our job to improve this country. If we study about corruption, we can try to prevent it. Note that learning about corruption is not all about theory and textbooks. It is about characters as well. We have to plant character in our life, so we can implement it in our daily life. Coming to class in time is the easiest stuff to do, because if we come late, then we already corrupt time. In organization, if we are entrusted with money, then we take good care of it. We use it wisely and with honesty. Lastly, corruption can be prevented by those who already have power and title as well. For example, our former president, Ms. Megawati Soekarno-Putri from KPK, this institution which has the responsibility to get rid of corruption. If someday we have already become successful, remember to always use what we have wisely and with honesty.
In general, philosophy is a science that seeks to investigate the nature of things. Pancasila is defined as a philosophy because it was the result of Indonesian founding fathers' deep reflection, which was then put into a system. Pancasila is considered and believed as a norms, judicious and best values suited to the personality of Indonesian nation. The philosophy of Pancasila can be classified as a practical philosophy. This means the philosophy of Pancasila contains not only fundamental thinking, but it also used to guide the way of life of Indonesian people. By using Pancasila as a way of life, Indonesian people can achieve their spiritual and physical happiness, both in this life and afterlife. Pancasila as a philosophy can also be defined as a critical and rational reflection of Indonesia as the basis of state and cultural reality of the nation, with the aim of obtaining its fundamental and comprehensive points of understanding. As an example, there is a girl who is Balinese and a boy who is Sundanese. They love each other and want to get married. If their parents consider Pancasila as their basis of cultural reality, they will allow their children to get married. Here is another example as a Pancasila as a practical philosophy. There is a thief that stole one of the resident things. If the resident consider Pancasila as a practical philosophy, they will help the resident to catch the thief. Essentially, the unity of Pancasila precepts is not only logical formal entity, but also includes the basic ontologically, epistemological, and axiological base of the Pancasila precepts. Ontologically, Pancasila is study of origin or history. Epistemologically, Pancasila is study that discusses truth and is trustable. Axiologically, Pancasila is a field that investigates values and its benefit. For example, value of pleasure and psychological. And here comes the question, what is the purpose of studying this? As a student, it can be used as a reference in solving the problem of national education from a physical point of view.